The 1998 drama, The Red Violin, is the story of a mysterious instrument passed down generation to generation, spanning multiple centuries, countries, and owners. There's a real-life version of the film with multiple violins and harrowing stories at the center of it.
Violins of Hope tells the story of 6 violins and what they and their owners went through together during the Holocaust.
The Violins of Hope first went on exhibit in Charlotte 10 years ago. UNC Charlotte musicology professor Jay Grimes was so moved by it, he traveled to Europe to learn more.
I took a trip out to Tel Aviv and met with Amnon Weinstein. He's the patriarch of the Violins of Hope project. He's the one who started to collect these violins and restore them with his son Avshalom. And I spent about a week with the Weinsteins in their workshop, and I learned their stories, and it was during that trip that I became inspired to write this book about the Violins of Hope.
Jay's book, released in 2014, chronicles the stories of 6 Jewish violinists and their instruments in and around the time of the Holocaust.
The violins come to the Weinsteins usually through either the children of the survivors or their grandchildren. So it's my job as a historian to sort of flesh those stories out, do some fact-checking, and put everything in the correct historical perspective.
In certain cases, the violins themselves may have saved their owners' lives in the form of preferential treatment from Nazi guards.
I was really fascinated by these stories, this idea that music, this art form that I love and that I've dedicated my life and career to, in certain circumstances could actually make the difference between whether someone lived or whether they died.
The Nazis took the great instruments for themselves. They did not leave the really great instruments with the musicians in the camps.
5 of the roughly 95 restored violins recently came back to Charlotte as part of a national tour. New music was written and performed by an ensemble of faculty and students from UNC Charlotte, Queen's University, and Central Piedmont. Intonations also featured 2 of the Violins of Hope.
And there were times in practicing when I was watching the words while I was playing that I would just start crying because the stories were so incredibly sad, and I would just have to stop.
Dr. Michaela Myers serves as the assistant dean and professor of violin at West Virginia University. She drove the 6+ hours to be a soloist in the performances, playing a violin that dates back to 1871.
It's a gorgeous instrument, and it's considered one of the really most playable and beautiful instruments in the collection.
The violin that Dr. Myers will be playing on tonight was once owned by Heinrich Zvi Haftel. He was a promising young violinist who was dismissed from his orchestral positions in Germany simply for being Jewish. And he might have perished in Nazi-occupied Europe had he not been offered a position as one of the first concertmasters of the Palestine Orchestra, now the world-famous Israel Philharmonic. And so playing the violin is what got him out of Europe and to safety.
For Dr. Myers, playing on a violin with historical significance is nothing new.
But I also play on this violin, which was my grandfather's violin, and this is sort of another side of the story of World War II. He was about to go on to become a big-time soloist, but he was drafted. This violin that he was playing on at that time went with him to the war, and this landed on the beach at Normandy D-Day +2.
The music for Intonations was written from the perspective of what if the violins themselves could talk? What would they say about their past and the people who played them? With Audrey Babcock singing soprano and the words appearing on screen, the stories of resilience and survival came to life.
The stories are told from the perspective of the violin. So when Audrey, the singer, was singing, she is giving voice to the violin and that I'm playing.
The 7th and final movement of the piece is called Liberation, representing the liberation of the Jewish people when the concentration camps were finally shut down. That's when the 2nd Violin of Hope appeared on stage, played by 15-year-old David Karpoff.
My part is when the young performer walks in is passing from generation to generation. So you'll see I'll walk out slowly playing my part while Miss Michaela is still playing her part.
These violins have passed from one person to the next, and this music will live on from one musician to the next.
The atrocities of World War II and the Holocaust will never be forgotten. Thanks to Violins of Hope, the music and the instruments of the time won't be forgotten either.
I think it says a lot that even in the worst of times, even in mankind's darkest hours, people held on to their music, they held on to their violins, and that's what gave them hope.
To know that these violins were in the circumstances that they were in, and they were often the thing that saved people's lives. It makes the exhibit and the music and the whole experience for anyone who has a chance to participate in it very, very special and meaningful.
For Carolina Impact, I'm Jason Terzis reporting.